In my previous Tarotorials, I showed you the deeper and original meanings of the Fool and the Magician. Next up is the High Priestess. I mentioned that this card is sort of like a feminine counterpart to the Magician, but the High Priestess's meaning is actually very deep, while the Magician is kind of lays it out on the table for you. I'll be skipping a popular media example this time because the last video got styled on by YouTube's copyright. I tried 15 different anti-copyright tricks and nothing worked, but it's fine. The High Priestess is a pretty deep card, so I don't think one media example would do her justice anyway. I would say that this one might be shorter because of the lack of media example, but the High Priestess actually has a lot going on. She is one of the most symbolism-heavy cards in all of Tarot. I've been reading Tarot since I was a little kid. I still end up learning something while making this video. That's how much symbolism is actually in here. For example, the High Priestess is compared to the Shekinah, a Hebrew representation of God but in the feminine form. Stuff like this is why when Christians say Tarot is anti-Christian, it always makes me laugh at the ignorance of it. There is a ton of Christian and Jewish influences on these cards. The Priestess Cross and her holding the Torah, to name a few. Since we're on the card, let's dissect the art. Starting from the top, the High Priestess is represented by the number 2. 2s in Tarot mean choices, decisions, crossroads, duality, balance, connection, partnership, and union. As we can see on the card, the Priestess has one pillar on either side of her, one white with a J and one black with a B. These represent the Yachin and Boaz, the 2 bronze pillars that hold up the entrance to the Temple of King Solomon in Jerusalem. They represent strength and wisdom, with Yachin meaning he shall establish, and Boaz meaning in strength. Waite was a Freemason, and Freemasons view these pillars as being important for their symbolism. Now, a lot of people think that the imagery behind her is a doorway or portal. It sort of is, and I'll get to that, but it's a tapestry first. A big fabric poster with art of palm leaves and pomegranates growing on the tree of life. The palm leaves represent men, and pomegranates represent women. This same motif is also on the Empress gown. I'll talk about her in the next video. It's kind of a bummer that there isn't a third thing to represent non-binary people, but this card is representing multiple dualities, and Waite is from the 1900s. Something tells me that he probably didn't know very many trans people or non-binary people. But I think there is a beautiful symbology in trans people and non-binary people that's being slept on. Trans people represent a connection between the sexes, that despite the 2's many differences, there is still that thread that connects them both. Non-binary people represent the androgyny of God, the shapelessness of God, and the forces of nature, and how both male and female came from this genderless energy. Non-binary can also represent a form of purity or simplicity, a separation from law, or represents the tree of life. But I didn't make the cards. So we have boys as palm leaves and pomegranates are girls. Womp womp. The Tree of Life has 2 forms, the one in Kabbalah and the one in the Bible. I don't know much about Kabbalah. It also has connections to Crowley's religion, Thelema, which came after the RWS deck was made, only 3 years after publishing the first deck. I equally don't know anything about Thelema, but Waite was not referencing anything from Thelema when he was making this deck because it didn't exist yet. The Tree of Life in Kabbalah is a pretty dense conversation, and it gets into some conspiracy theory territory. I don't want to get into that, but basically the Kabbalah Tree of Life is 10 to 11 spheres called Sephirot that each represent a moral value: crown, wisdom, intelligence, mercy, judgment, beauty, lasting endurance, majesty, foundation of the world, and kingdom. The paths between the nodes represent the connection between the concepts and how we travel between them. This tree also represents creation, enlightenment, and more. The Tree of Life from the Bible is one of the 3 trees in the Garden of Eden, or it's all one tree. They're not 100% decided on that one yet. It's only been a few thousand years since the Bible was made. You think they'd figure it out already. Anyway, one of the trees is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but you know it better as the tree that Adam and Eve ate from that they weren't supposed to. So the tapestry represents man, woman, and the original sin. Or maybe it represents a time before sin when mankind was more pure. Considering that the High Priestess represents secrets, it could mean the secrets of the Garden of Eden or the knowledge of the tree itself. Either way, man and woman are connected by the Tree of Life here. The tapestry is also the veil of Solomon's temple, which is why it's between Yachin and Boaz. And Solomon's temple was a thick curtain and separated the normie room from God's room. So the main area was for people like you and me. Well, maybe not me, because I'm a bat. And the area beyond the veil was where God's presence dwelled. It's a barrier between man and God. That barrier was made when Adam and Eve ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge, their sin cutting us off from God's presence. So when I said people think the tapestry is a doorway, they're sort of right. The tapestry blocks the doorway that leads to the room where God's presence is. Yeah, isn't it super crazy how Christians insist that tarot isn't Christian, but it's It's talking so heavily about this stuff. Anyway, the High Priestess sits between the viewer and the veil as if blocking us off from God's presence and greater knowledge. She guards secrets. On her head is a crown made of 2 half-crescent moons and a globe in the center. You witchy folks out there might recognize this as looking similar to the moon phases symbol often used in witchcraft, showing the waxing and waning phases of the moon. The moon is often used as a symbol of witchcraft and femininity, but this crown is also based off of the Egyptian goddess Hathor's crown. In ancient Egypt, Hathor was a sky goddess and mother wife of Ra, the sun god, the bird one. There were multiple sun gods like Khepri and Amun-Ra, but we're talking about regular Ra. Hathor was also the mother of the pharaohs, in a symbolic sense at least. I won't get deep into her meanings because then we get into the Eye of Ra, her being a feminine version of Ra, and how even that has multiple goddesses representing the eye. Just remember the connection to Hathor and that she represented music, dance, joy, love, sexuality, and motherhood. She's basically the goddess of womanhood, further leaning the High Priestess into a representation of divine femininity. Next, the High Priestess is wearing a blue robe. Blue means spirituality, healing, peace, communication, and calmness, and her hands is a scroll that says Torah without the H. Likely the H is obfuscated by her robe. The Torah is the Jewish Bible, specifically the first 5 chapters. If you're Christian, it's the Old Testament. The cross on her chest can be a connection to all of those Judeo-Christian connections, but it's also a symbol recognizing the 4 elements of fire, earth, wind, and water, or wands, pentacles, swords, and cups, and their connection to each other. The final bit of symbolism we have here is the crescent moon on the floor. This more connects between her and the moon and its feminine energies. Wow, that was a lot to get through. So all in all, High Priestess represents knowledge, wisdom, feminine energies, divine femininity, spirituality, intuition, the moon, trusting your instincts, and connection between people. Reversed, she means secrecy, deception, a time to retreat, blocked intuition, undesirable connection, a lack of self-control, ignorance, delusion, emotional irregularity, and vanity. In an upward position, this card is ideal, but in a reversed position, the answer becomes much less clear, and it might be time for the querent to figure this one out on their own. So in a reading, the High Priestess can represent a woman who is asking for the reading, or a woman who is the subject of the reading, similar to how the Magician represents a guy. Like the Magician, this card can also mean it's time for the female querent to seek the counsel of another woman. The High Priestess can represent a more experienced or knowledgeable woman, basically. Like, you know, a mom, an aunt, any more knowledgeable female person, basically. In a reading for love, I'd say it's time to get some insight from the women in your life. Stay calm, be patient, love is something that grows. Be yourself, be honest, and follow what that little voice in your head has to say, but focus on rational feelings. What you have may be a deep connection, one of understanding and trust. You might have moved on past the passionate early days of the relationship and have moved into a more intimate and serious phase. It's time to open up and allow yourself to be more vulnerable with people and share more of your true self with them. Tell them more about what you're thinking. The High Priestess can also mean you're stuck choosing between multiple partners. Overall, this is a highly desirable card to receive in a romantic relationship, let alone any situation. Reverse though, you need to calm down. Your intuition might be misleading you. It's easy for your inner voice to become overly emotional and assume the worst. Think on whether that's what you truly feel, or whether you're overthinking. In business, you should again rely on your intuition. If something sounds too good to be true, it often is. Never take what they have to say at face value, and don't give an immediate answer. Investigate. Even if this is a good opportunity, it might not be the right time. You're not always the right person at the right time for the right thing. If you're unsure, take your time to figure out what you need in order to be sure. Take a more inward and retrospective approach in this situation. Reversed, you took action when you should have thought it through. Re-educate yourself and make sure you're more knowledgeable before you dig a hole too deep to get out of. You can turn this around, or maybe it might be time for you to get out. The simple way of thinking of the High Priestess is upright, stay calm, follow your intuition, stay educated, and reversed, your intuition was wrong or misguided. You're missing key info, or something is being kept from you. But that's it. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the patrons on Patreon. They help support me so that I can keep making what I'm interested in. I'm not monetized on this channel yet, and the first half of the year is usually really bad for ad revenue on my main channel, so the help is super appreciated. You can join the Patreon too. I'll probably get members unlocked here soon, so if this is in the future, you can also click join below the video and get your name in future videos for just a couple bucks a month. So thanks again to Aspirant Artist, Paper, Faye Penguin, Momentary Unicorn, Aurora the Puppy Moth, Sly, Nat, Selena, Marius, Yeenie, Worm Syrup, Brask, Ver, Beeve, Bait, Sly again, Colorado Blue, Vaderson, Linky again, Splackjack, Fuzoku, and Sushion. I'll see you all later. I have to ask a gnome about why he keeps stealing my socks. Yes, bats use socks.